Hey guys, I'm Heidi Prieb. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. This month on this channel, we're talking about maintaining our personal integrity inside of close relationships. And today, I want to talk about a topic that is very close to the heart of this issue, which is how can we make sure that we are giving ourselves the best possible chance at being in relationships that make it feel easy to be connected to our integrity? And what do we do when we feel like the close relationships in our lives actually challenge that quite a bit? So, one thing that I want to get clear on right from the get go is that I don't like the traditional usage of the word toxic, in that when I hear it being used to describe people or relational dynamics, it often seems like there's this implied sense that one or both people are inherently morally flawed or bad in some way. And I just want to get clear from the get go that when I am using the term toxic to describe relational dynamics here, what I am definitely not saying is that one or both people in the dynamic have unrecoverable moral injuries or flaws. What I'm referencing here is any relational dynamic where the way that the relationship functions essentially drains one or both people much, much more than it replenishes them. And this could happen for a variety of reasons. So, a quick example is very often when you have one anxious person and one avoidant person in a romantic relationship with each other, the behavior that each person does that triggers the other the most is in the blind spot of the person doing that behavior, which leads to this dynamic where both people feel as though they are behaving morally and doing the right thing in the relationship, but the other person is responsible for all of the ways in which the relationship is going wrong. And some things like this can actually be fixed potentially with a lot more awareness on behalf of both people. So I'm not saying that these relationships are unrecoverable, but sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you actually get a situation where people's attachment wounds are quite compatible, but the underlying core of who they both are as people turns out to not be that compatible once they get the attachment wounding out of the way. So there's huge variation in terms of what it means to have a toxic dynamic, as well as what can be done about it. But today I want to talk specifically about how, even if all of those uncertainties are in place, we can make sure that we are maintaining our own integrity inside of relationships and not creating more challenge for ourselves in places where it doesn't need to exist. And the quick kind of warning that I want to give out here is that if you put these boundaries into place, they're likely to work, which means they're going to bring you closer to a place where you have a very good chance at being in a healthy, secure relationship with another healthy and secure person. But these boundaries are likely to make the people in your life who you are incompatible with on some major way, whether that means that your wounding triggers each other, or there's just things about you and this other person that just don't jive at the end of the day. These boundaries might be the things that make those types of relationships reach their natural end. So these boundaries are not magic bullets that will fix the most dysfunctional relationships, but they will help you get to a place where you can feel like you are confident in your ability to be in a healthy relationship, which I think is often what holds back a lot of us who are insecurely attached from seeking out more secure leaning partners. So, a quick example of this. Several years ago, I took a trip to visit a close friend who I hadn't seen in a while. And on that trip, he was kind of catching me up on this new relationship he was in. And there was a lot of stuff he was telling me about his partner that he seemed really dissatisfied with. But almost every time he would tell me something he was unhappy about, he would qualify it or follow it up with some version of, but I do the same thing too. And something about that qualification really stuck with me. I kept thinking it didn't quite sit right with me that that was the way he was reasoning about these things. And so I remember on the plane ride home, sitting with all of the stuff that he had told me and thinking to myself, I wonder what would happen for this person if instead of telling himself, I'm behaving disrespectfully and she's behaving disrespectfully, so those things cancel each other out, he started both holding his partner accountable for the ways in which she was disrespecting him and also holding himself accountable for the ways in which he was disrespecting his partner. And it occurred to me that that would actually create a really beautiful upward spiral in their relationship where they could both grow a lot as people and as a couple. And at the time, I still had a lot of insecure patterning online myself. So when I got off the plane and went back to my day to day life, I started really thinking about this and going, okay, in which ways am I kind of writing off two wrongs as making a right? And what would happen if I started holding myself and the people in my life accountable for the ways in which we're hurting each other or letting each other down or just generally behaving poorly towards each other? And in some cases, this made a lot of relationships change for the better. But in other cases, I would say kind of the majority, for reasons that completely make sense, a lot of people weren't willing to meet me there. And so what I started wondering then was, what if, instead of assuming that both people have to be on board for this to work, I just looked at keeping my side of the street clean? What if I decided that no matter how often someone disrespects me or does something that frustrates me, I was not going to allow myself to behave in a way that I would ultimately feel not proud of in response? And my first thought was, well, then I would probably start getting really frustrated with the people in my life who were behaving less honestly or less honorably if I were always holding myself accountable to not reacting on an equal playing field to them. And then it struck me, wait a minute, if I did this for long enough, I would probably start growing really proud of the person that I am and the way that I'm showing up inside of relationships. And I imagine over time, relationships with people who don't employ these more honest and direct communication strategies would start to look less attractive to me, because I would understand on a deep core body-based level, because I had proven to myself that it was true, that I would be capable of functioning in a relationship that doesn't include these types of interactions. And so this began a journey of figuring out how I could do that and how I could keep my sense of integrity intact inside of relationships to the point where I felt like I was ready for more secure, reciprocal dynamics. So this video is an exploration of some of the boundaries that really helped me in this process, as well as some of the kind of challenging and difficult to digest truths that came along with setting those boundaries. So we're going to dive into what those boundaries are, with the caveat that all of these are boundaries we need to set with ourselves. So this is not about trying to control or change other people's behavior. In fact, a lot of these boundaries are about setting boundaries with the parts of ourselves that want to control and change other people's behavior. Because again, all we can do here is keep our side of the street clean and make ourselves ready for better dynamics when they come along. The first self-boundary that I think goes a long way in the direction of maintaining our integrity inside of relationships is the boundary: if I can only get my needs met in a relationship through force or manipulation, including and especially if I have first tried to get my needs met honestly and the other person is uninterested in meeting them, I owe it to myself to walk away from that relationship or to set boundaries that allow me to not rely on it in the same way, instead of moving into that space where I'm trying to get my needs met in a manipulative way. So, what we're going to talk about here is the fact that very often when we are insecurely attached, we don't see the things we are doing as manipulative. We don't see our attachment strategies as manipulative, because at the time that we developed them, they were genuinely not. When we are children, what we are doing is adapting to our environment by any means possible. And so, if our parents are not meeting our needs, we don't have another way of getting our needs met, right? Children are not autonomous members of society. And so it's actually adaptive for us to find unconscious strategies to get our needs met through our parents if they were refusing to meet them when we ask them directly. So this might look like if you are on the anxious side of the spectrum. Your parent may have been willing to meet your needs, but quite busy and unable to attend to you all the time. And so what may have been adaptive for you as a child, if your parent was unwilling to attend to your need when you expressed it at the volume that it existed at, is you may have started to unconsciously, automatically amplify the volume of your emotions and show more and more distress until they attended to you. Or as you got older, you may have even learned that lashing out towards your parent or telling them something negative you think about them would get their attention, and it would get them to see how badly you were hurt and how much you were in need. Nobody wants that to be the way of getting their needs met, but One of my favorite quotes on this topic by Margalise Fjellstad goes, "If there is no way to get what you want from direct approach, then manipulation is the only solution. Manipulation is the tool of the powerless person." And when we are children, we are all powerless to get all of our needs met on our own. But when we are adults, we are no longer powerless. I'm just going to put that point down there and return to it again shortly. On the flip side of things, for those of us with more avoidant patterning, early on in life, you were likely rejected by your caregivers if you were to show too much need or vulnerability. And so what your system naturally started doing for you, without you being conscious of it, is shutting down the areas of yourself that notice when you are in need or when you feel vulnerable. And that worked pretty well for you as a child because it meant that your parents were not disgusted by you and they did not reject you when you were in need. But as an adult, expressing needs and vulnerabilities are a big part of what keeps a relationship running healthily. So if you don't know how to do this, what was once adaptive for you in childhood is going to become accidentally or unconsciously manipulative in an adult relationship. The same way, the anxious person who had a very adaptive strategy in childhood that forced their parents to meet their needs enough would be unconsciously behaving manipulatively in adulthood if they were to use the same strategy on an adult partner who is not responsible for meeting their needs the way a parent is. The problem is that when you grow up insecurely attached, you generally don't have a natural transition into the world of interdependent adult relationships. So the securely attached child learns healthy dependency on their parent, and then they grow steadily more independent as they grow up until they get to a place where they understand that they have a lot of different strategies for getting their needs met, some of which are interpersonal, some of which are personal, and often there's fluidity between those things. So at the points in their lives where they have more people around, more needs they can get met interpersonally, they might rely more on their partner or on their community. But during the periods of their lives where they have less of those resources available, they still have strategies for meeting a lot of their own needs and seeking out new healthy partnerships or community to eventually get back into that more interdependent patterning. The difference is that when you grew up insecurely attached, you often just kind of carry on with your original strategy for getting your needs met without really checking in on whether it still applies to the adult world. So what this means is that if you are anxious, you might unconsciously have this strategy online that if I have an attachment to somebody, so if I have an attachment to, let's say, my partner, they are responsible for helping me regulate my feelings whenever I'm distressed and for meeting my emotional needs, the way that my parent was once responsible for that. Or if you have more avoidant patterning online, you might still have that implicit belief that everybody is responsible for meeting their own needs and that there's no reason for you to show any vulnerability or need interpersonally, which often means that when you get to a place where your partner is in need or showing vulnerability, that same voice that shuts it down in you when it comes up is naturally going to shut down or dissociate from your partner being in that state, which might be accidentally conditioning your partner to shut down parts of themselves in order to stay close to you, the same way that happened to you as a child. And again, this is not a conscious manipulation, but it's not a direct and honest exchange of what's going on for both people. Because your vulnerabilities and what's actually going on for you that's causing you to shut down in those situations are not conscious to you. And so the work that needs to get done here is making yourself aware of what your own vulnerabilities and challenges are so that you can sensitize yourself enough to them to become aware of them and then to bring them into the partnership. Because we can only meet other people as deeply as we've met ourselves. And if you haven't met yourself on that deep level, as soon as your partner tries to go there with you, you're going to shut down. And on the flip side of the process, if you are anxious and you feel like when you're bringing in your needs and vulnerabilities to your partner, they're refusing to meet them, maybe they're dissociating from them, maybe they're not interested in them, maybe they show contempt in response to you being honest and direct about what your needs are, you might automatically believe that that gives you permission to then try to get your needs met by your partner through any means possible. So maybe you amplify your emotion, trying to get their attention. Maybe you start attacking their character because you believe that if you can get them to see how bad of a person they are and how badly they're behaving, then they will turn around and attend to your needs. But what's in your blind spot in this situation is that your partner is not your parent. And in healthy, secure romantic relationships, if someone does not want to meet our needs, we have two options. One is to distance ourselves or leave that relationship. Because if there's a way in which we really want to be close to someone, and someone does not want to be close to us in that way, the secure thing to do is to accept that this is probably not the relationship for me. Or the other option is to accept the limitations of the relationship and accept I can't make this person change. I cannot make them care about my needs. And I owe it to my own integrity to not try to force them to care about my needs if they don't want to. So I'm going to accept that this is something I'm not going to be able to get out of this person, at least for the time being. And I'm going to find ways to get my needs met in more flexible and adaptive ways. So maybe I need to bring in some extra friends in this area. Or maybe I need to find ways to self-soothe and self-regulate around the areas that my partner does not want to meet me in. And so which of those you go with is going to be a personal choice. And the same is true on the avoidance side of the spectrum. But the idea here is that we are continuously coming back to the moment where we are frustrated with our partner. Maybe we feel like they're too dismissive or they're too needy. And we're reminding ourselves, I am an adult and they are an adult. I cannot respond to them the way I would respond to my parent when I was a child. So through either activation or deactivation, I have a choice point here where I can be honest and direct with them and say something like, hey, I'm really sad that you're not willing to meet me here. And then step back and figure out what you want to do about the fact that they're unwilling to meet you there. Or to say to your partner, I feel really overwhelmed by how much you seem to want from me. I'm not sure that I'm capable of giving you what you need. And both of these have the potential to open up a direct and honest line of communication. But if that doesn't happen, the self-boundary of, I will not force someone to show up the way I want them to show up, comes online. I will allow them to have whatever reaction they want to have, to set whatever boundaries they want to set, and then I will spend time with myself and I will decide, is this the right person for me, given the fact that they don't seem to want to meet me in X, Y, or Z area, which blends really naturally into the second self-boundary, which is I will see needs in a relationship as a consent-based thing, not a coercion-based thing. Which means it's my responsibility to seek out people to be close to who authentically want to give and receive love in the same way that I want to give and receive love. So this one was a big frame shift for me. I had to go from thinking that nobody's needs were anybody else's responsibility to meet, to realizing that part of the joy of really close, intimate connections is that people enjoy meeting each other's needs. And that for me, when I really love someone and want to be close to them, it is a privilege to be that person's go-to person. For me to be the first person they call or think of when they have something that they want to go over, or when they need some support or co-regulation. And it works in the opposite direction too. It's a privilege for someone else to be the person who I see as my go-to person, who I want to immediately call to talk things over with or to share little parts of my day with. And that adult secure relationships are not these manipulative places where everyone's trying to force each other into doing things for each other. It's about finding someone who just authentically likes you and who you authentically like and who you enjoy giving to and receiving from and vice versa. So what it helps to check in on here is this. Ask yourself the question, if I were in a relationship with someone who gave and received love in the same way that I do, how healthy and functional would that relationship be? And you might find that some interesting things come up for you in the exploration of that question. So I had to admit to myself that if I were in a relationship at the point I was asking myself this question with someone who was exactly like me, I'd be like, that's a really stubborn and uncompromising person. And it would probably be pretty hard for me to get close to them because I would have to do a lot of compromising to fit myself into their life. And this is often the case with those of us who err a little bit more avoidant. We have this story in our heads that we are doing the right thing by keeping ourselves self-regulated, and we're not noticing how much of the proximity seeking and how much of the relational glue We are unconsciously requiring the other person to provide in order to stay close to us. And then on the flip side of things, if you are more anxious, you might have to accept that being in a more secure partnership means you're going to have a partner who has a lot of their own needs and vulnerabilities that they regularly bring to you. And you're going to have to get comfortable switching off in that secure base role instead of always expecting your partner to be the one who is strong and capable and invulnerable, which might be unconsciously what your system keeps seeking out. So this question often points towards some really important areas for growth that we need to do in order to be ready for a secure relationship. But this all starts with making the decision that we are going to seek people out who are happy to be with us in the way that we want to be with someone. And that might mean there's lots of growth to do on our behalf to make ourselves ready for the kind of person who we would want to be with. Which puts us right into self-boundary number 3, which is I will engage in good faith relationships. So I will pick partners for myself who I truly, deeply believe are my intellectual and my moral or emotional equal. I will not date people who I put on a pedestal, and I will not date people who I secretly think are beneath me in some way. It's really, really hard to feel like we are in integrity with ourselves if we are in a relationship with someone who we do not truly and genuinely respect as a human being. And it is also really hard to be in integrity with ourselves if we are willing to throw our self-respect out the window for the sake of a relationship. So at this phase, we're probably going to have to examine our model of people and the world and relationships. So if we are more avoidant, we tend to have that worldview of I'm okay, other people are not okay. And so we might unconsciously be picking partners who we believe are a lot more needy than we are. And then when we stop and think, well, what would it look like to pick a partner who is truly as competent and capable of dealing with their lives as I am? What might come online is this realization that, then I would actually be seen by another person. If I felt like I was dating someone who was truly my intellectual equal, then I wouldn't be able to get away with the things that I kind of on some level know I'm getting away with by my partner not being able to see me fully. And that might be a really scary thought. And we might have to do some work on getting to the place where being fully seen and sometimes being challenged by another person does not feel deeply offensive and repulsive to us. And on the flip side of things, for those who are more anxious, if you were with someone who was as emotionally available as you, or at least as emotionally available as a secure person, it's likely that you wouldn't feel as soothed and protected as you do dating more avoidant types who suppress their vulnerabilities. So what would more likely happen in a relationship like that is that your own dysregulation would come online more often, and you would need to find ways to self-soothe more often so that you could be a reasonably matched partner for someone who needs you to be in the secure base role for them approximately as often as they are doing the same for you. So if we go out deliberately searching for a partnership in which we consider the other person our true equal, both intellectually and emotionally, we're going to have to confront all of the stuff in ourselves that choosing partners who don't fully see us allows us to normally hide or dissociate from. And this is a really scary step, but a really important one that pushes us in the direction of secure relating in a fast way. The fourth self-boundary that helps us maintain a sense of integrity inside of our relationships is, I owe it to myself to advocate for my needs inside of a relationship and to not allow myself to grow resentful. I cannot be in a good faith relationship with someone else if I'm withholding significant pieces of information about the relationship that are high salience for me internally. So if I find myself growing repeatedly frustrated by something that my partner says or does, or by some expectation that they have of me that I don't want to meet, I owe it to the relationship to bring that thing forward and talk about how we could work with it, instead of holding on to that resentment and letting it fester. Resentment absolutely drives relationships into the ground. And so if we want our relationships to be healthy and to thrive, we need to get comfortable sensitizing ourselves to what our own needs are and to what our feelings are inside of a relationship and then bringing them forward rather than growing angry and contemptuous towards our partners under the surface. So, a skill that I've been trying to hone over the years is the skill of simply saying to another human being, hey, I want to bring this up because I notice that I'm growing resentful about it. And I really don't want there to be any form of resentment in our relationship. So, can we maybe talk out some of the ways we might be able to approach this situation differently so that I can let go of that resentment and just get back into the form of connection where I can look at you and just feel grateful that you're in my life? And in securely attached dynamics, these types of things come up all of the time. It's not that secure people never grow frustrated with each other, never get angry at one another, never resent each other. It's that they talk about it when it happens. They don't make it into a moral right versus wrong situation. They just look at how can we fix this so that both people's needs are getting met as consistently as possible. But it's impossible to get there if we have blocks around bringing up our own feelings to the other person. So this might be that we don't really know why we tend to get suddenly resentful or frustrated with our partner. It just comes online and suddenly we don't like them anymore. This is more often akin to an avoidant deactivation response. Or on the other side, it could feel like my partner is so unwilling to meet even the most basic of my needs that I have to chronically be bringing them up, and I'm growing resentful about that. And in both of these scenarios, once again, we refer to boundary number 1. Can I be honest about what's happening? If I err more avoidant, can I really try to tune in to what my feelings are that are behind that sense of growing contempt or frustration with my partner and communicate those feelings? And if I err more anxious, can I accept that if my partner simply doesn't want to meet my needs, it might be time for me to distance myself from the relationship, figure out why I'm continuously chasing partners who don't seem to want to meet my needs, and then figure out a different approach, which might require a bunch of self-work, for being in more secure partnerships where there is a more healthy and natural reciprocation of needs. But the idea is that if we don't bring up the things we feel challenged by in relationships, and we allow ourselves to grow resentful of our partners without giving them the opportunity to respond to the thing that we're frustrated with, we're not really engaging in good faith. And so that's eventually going to bleed back into our self-concept, and we're going to feel less and less proud of ourselves because we're not being honest in our relationship. So maintaining that sense of integrity here means being willing to take our own needs seriously and bringing them up in a fair and neutral way. Which, by the way, if that's a challenge for you, I have a video I posted earlier this week that is all about how to do this, which I will link in the description of this video, so you can go check that out next if this is an area that you feel kind of stumped on. And the last self-boundary, which is really just an amalgamation of all of the above, is I will have standards for how I treat other people, including how I treat myself, that I uphold regardless of how I am treated. So this is how we get out of that two wrongs make a right mentality, right? This is the opposite of going, well, my partner is disrespectful towards me, but I'm disrespectful towards them, so these cancel each other out. This is how we get in integrity. We go, even if the other person is behaving manipulatively, even if the other person is being unreasonable, even if the other person is an absolutely terrible person who should never have a relationship ever again in their lives, I will not fall out of integrity with myself in order to be close with them. If my options are behave manipulatively and lose my self-respect, but keep the relationship, or keep my self-respect, but lose the relationship, I will choose the latter, as hard as it will be. Because the more I get it into my bones that I am a person who respects both myself and other people, the more I am naturally going to start seeking out more healthy relational dynamics. It's just going to be the thing that feels right. But it's often a very, very long journey of getting here. So the last story I want to tell is a story that's actually not mine. It's from a book called Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. And the author of this book does anger management programs with people who are either in prison or in most cases mandated to take the programs. And he talks about what the most common things that he hears from people who end up in this program are. And one of the things that he apparently hears over and over again from people coming in with these explosive tempers is, I have anger issues. And what he responds to them is, the anger is not the problem. You have an abuse problem. But this is a very, very key distinction that a lot of us do not make. We often imagine that having a certain feeling or having a certain thing done to us means we are then justified to respond in whatever way we see fit or whatever way our emotional system is screaming at us to respond in. And learning to practice self-integrity in the face of these really challenging relationships means deciding that we will not stoop to the other person's level. We will remove ourselves if we are being baited into a dynamic that is going to take us out of integrity with ourselves. And it's going to be really hard in the moment. But insofar as we can practice these boundaries and build ourselves into people who will not behave manipulatively or disrespectfully, regardless of how other people treat us, the more we feel like we are deserving of healthy, mutual, loving relationships in all areas of our lives. And so the easier it will become for us over time to remove ourselves from these situations, practice self-respect, and put ourselves in healthier ones. Which by that point, we will know without a shadow of a doubt, because we have proved it to be true for ourselves over and over and over again, that we are ready for healthy, secure love. So respecting others means not lashing out, even if we are lashed out at. And respecting ourselves means taking ourselves out of situations where others are behaving badly or abusively towards us, refusing to numb out the pain that those situations cause, and then finding ways to be in connection with healthier people. All right, I think I'm going to leave it at that for today. But as always, any questions, thoughts that you have coming up as you've been going through this, please leave them in the comments section below. I love you guys. I hope you're taking care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you back here again really soon.